ever heard the phrase, she's going through the change? At my age, I'm old enough to remember those words being spoken, not just by my mother, but also by my grandmother. As a young child, I'd sit listening to the women gathered around the kitchen table over a cup of tea, talking about women's troubles. Because you see, women's troubles weren't really talked about very much back then. Like, do you remember when your periods weren't called your periods? Mine were called my time of the month. I remember being really confused when a school friend told me she had visitors every month. Ah yes, we've come a long way since then. These days, if you're a woman and you have painful periods, it's entirely possible that you'll be offered more than a hot water bottle. Or if you're a woman with heavy periods or flooding, the chances are that the only option available to you these days isn't to hide a black cardigan in the office bathroom for the days when, accidents can happen. And all around the world, actually no, let me correct myself. In some places around the world, women with diseases such as endometriosis, PCOS, adenomyosis, are actually getting diagnosed instead of being gaslit and ignored for years. Yes, we have come on a long way. I had our daughter at age 35, elderly prima gravida. We were so delighted. It was like as though we had won the lotto. We had this incredible daughter to guide and teach and care for and nurture. I took my job really seriously. But isn't it funny how sometimes throughout the lives of women, lipstick hides the hurt? What do I mean? Well, during the same few years that I was promoted several times at work, I tormented myself inside my own head, worrying I wasn't doing a good enough job as a mother, as a partner, in work and in life. You see, postnatal depression doesn't always look obvious on the outside. It's usually experienced in silence, though, and in secrecy, and sometimes in shame. For us, what happened next was what many of you are probably familiar with. We went trying for another baby. It's a great phrase, isn't it, really? Trying for another baby. It doesn't really hide the drama that's going on behind the scenes. And of course, no one can know that you're trying for another baby, especially not at work. For us, what followed then were the miscarriages, one after another. More silence, more secrecy, until we eventually arrived at that lovely label, unexplained infertility. Was it just me who wondered, did that mean that they couldn't find anything wrong with me, so I must be doing something wrong? But it was coming up to my 40th birthday that I began to experience the symptoms. I'd wake in the morning time and I'd feel as though I had been run over by a bus while I slept. I had aches and pains all over and I felt old, really, really old. I also had brain fog and night sweats. I remember thinking, with my nurse's hat on, these are symptoms of the menopause. So off I went to the doctor. But he told me I was too young to be in menopause. I remember coming home from that appointment feeling very confused. I mean, I was crying as well. But I remember thinking, what was wrong with me then? I just want to feel like myself again. Over the coming 2 years, my symptoms got much worse. I remember an older friend asking me if I was having tropical moments. No, mine were more like blowtorch moments. Did that count? Back and forth I went, again and again to the doctor. But I was too young to be in menopause, and my bloods were normal. And what did I expect him to do anyway? I call them my lonely years. Tricky, lonely years, while I tried to figure out how to manage symptoms of what was, in actual fact, an early menopause. Back then, there wasn't much in the line of, interventions of any sort, really. I'd love to be able to tell you that because I've done a lot of work on myself, I handled it beautifully. If I told you that, though, I'd be telling you a lie. There were two very distinct modes that I remember operating in, particularly at the beginning until I realised there was another way. The first of them I affectionately called martyr mode. Now, I'm telling you this not because I think that you know anything about this at all, but just in case a friend ever shares it with you. I was tired. Now, I mean really tired. But at the same time, I had a sort of a compulsion to get everything on my to-do list done. I'd spend my weeks trying to stay on top of things so that I could spend the weekends trying to catch up on things so that I could stay on top of things the next week. And if I sat down, I'd feel guilty. About what? I'm not really sure, but it felt bad. And I couldn't really. I couldn't. There was just so much to do. It was all very well for himself to say, sit down, but I couldn't. Don't judge me for this next bit. There were days when I was so tired and felt so bad. I remember thinking, no one sees how much I do around here. They'll be sorry when I'm gone. But no one likes a martyr, not even the martyr herself. I was whinging in my own head, but I didn't really know how to stop. I remember the day, though, the day it happened, when I changed into the other mode. I was at home, you know the way you'd be, folding laundry in the kitchen. And then I took the pile of laundry and I put it, you know where I put it, at the bottom of the stairs. Because sure, someone going upstairs, they'd be able to bring it up for me later. It was a few hours later. In the hall, I spotted them. And that's when I felt it. A sort of a stirring on the inside. I remember thinking, all right, well, I'll leave it there now and see how long it takes someone to notice and bring them up. A few hours later, I'm back, secretly hoping that they're still there. And they were. That's when it happened. There was like a little switch went off inside my head. No more martyr mode. I then went to mean girl. I am sick and tired picking up after everyone around this place. No one does anything. Everything is left to me. But it wasn't just at home that I was like that. Have you ever been in the car? You're about 3 or 4 cars back from the red traffic lights. Now, the mood is fine. You're not in a hurry. You're just sitting there, waiting for the light to go green. And then it does. And nothing happens. And in like 3.2 seconds, you've gone to, is there a particular shade of green he's waiting for? On and on I would be mean, not just at home and also in the world, but also in my own head. Oh yeah, they were tricky. Menopause was tricky. And the funny thing is, you see, some women have very little in the line of symptoms at all, whereas others experience debilitating symptoms that impact them every single day. But the thing is, these days, we have much more support and interventions like HRT, which can dramatically help with those symptoms. But I'm here to tell you that it takes more than a patch to thrive in menopause. It takes a different story, a different narrative about what it means for you to be a woman in her 40s or 50s, but also an understanding and knowing that menopause, it is a time to pause, take stock, and decide how you're going to be for the second half of life. You see, the media and the marketeers, they'd have you believe that as a woman in your 40s or 50s, you should be focused on trying to stay young and avoid getting old. Selling us shampoo and skincare. It trivialises the symptoms that some women experience, but more than that. It tells a story and narrative about you that is neither useful or true. What if no more periods meant no more people-pleasing or placating? What if no more periods meant no more endlessly putting yourself last and other people's needs in front of yours? What if less estrogen meant less playing small, less being sidelined, less being interrupted all the time? I was only a child when I first heard the story about the 3 stages of womanhood: maiden, mother, crone. But even as a child, I had some questions. For example, what if you weren't a mother? Where did you fit in then? And did no one else think there's a bit of a gap between mother and wise old crone? So I was delighted when I heard the story about the 4 stages of womanhood. Maiden, creative, enchantress, sage. Enchantress, she who can cast spells and weave magic. That's a story I'm buying into. But she was also known as warrior woman. Generational cycle breaker and legacy builder. And she brings great change, because it is she who asks us to stop and to check in and decide who we are becoming for the second half of life. But more than that, she asks you to go inside and cull and cut away the stories that no longer serve you. And while you're in there, to rediscover the dreams that you once put away. She's that little voice in your head that says, Is this it? What about me? She's that restless yearning that has you wondering, is there nothing more? It is she who really can bring great change for women and allow us to have our voices heard. In medicine, so that we can get the treatments that we deserve. In our workplaces, so that we can challenge the bias but not be distracted by it. In politics, so that we can halt the erosion of women's rights that are happening all around this world. In our own homes, so we can model self-empowerment for our sons and daughters. And in our own lives, so that we can live lives that make our hearts sing. Imagine a world where enough women say enough, where enough women believe this story about what it means to be a woman in her 40s and 50s. Imagine the change that can happen. Imagine the change that can happen in your world if you believe this story. Thank you.